Hello everyone, I'm Andrea Woodcroft and this is my vlog supporting our new Conservative government. Last week I was speaking about fox hunting and today I'm going to be speaking about the Human Rights Act. Now, our government is planning to repeal the Human Rights Act, but I feel that I'm perhaps with some of those backbenchers who are uneasy about the Act being repealed because I think there are some rights that we should be upholding and not denying. So, for example, I'm thinking of something like the right to marry and produce children. Now, I believe that marriage really upholds the fabric of society when it's between a man and a woman, and it is not something that we should be looking to ban, but we should be supporting it. And I am sure that our government would not want to be denying that right to a couple, for example, like William and Catherine, who are doing a marvellous job of bringing up their children. And I certainly wouldn't want to see other people who aspire to them also being denied that right. So I think that's quite concerning. Just looking at my list here. See, there's another right here, the right to education. Well, I believe that people have the right to pay for their education, and I simply don't see why we should be denied that right. So again, that is something of concern to me. Something else on the list here, the right to torture people. Now, I do realise that torture is not a popular subject. It's not something that we really want to discuss at the dinner table, but it is something I feel that's necessary for national security. So, I'm sort of thinking, obviously, of people who need to be tortured. So, terrorists, for example, and perhaps even suspected terrorists. Now, these are the sort of people that cause a lot of damage, upset, and anxiety in urban areas. And I think that we should be reserving the right to torture them, not repealing it. I think perhaps certain asylum seekers as well, who are perhaps not genuine, we should also be reserving the right to torture. Now, I do think perhaps one of the more sensible things that Tony Blair did was to cede the right to torture to the Americans after and during the Iraq War at Guano Bay, or whatever it was called. And I think that was probably a better thing that we gave that responsibility over to the Americans, because it's not something that we really like to sort of talk about or admit that we're doing, but I certainly don't think we should be repealing the right to do it. So that's something else. Oh, I need glasses. I'm sorry, I've read that completely wrong. It's the right not to be tortured. It's the right not to be tortured, not the right to torture people, the right not to be tortured. Well, Theresa May will definitely want to change that, so you'd better forget I said any of that. Well, I wonder now perhaps if there are some other things on here that do need to be repealed. The right to peaceful enjoyment of property. Yes, you see, now that I think about it, our neighbours Carol and Martin last year erected a 17-foot fence between their garden and ours. Now, we do have a very long garden and it seemed to go on for miles and miles. It was very distressing. Now, we did have to take them to court to get it removed, although it was all settled very amicably and they're very good friends of ours. But I can see that their wish to enjoy their property was kind of impinged by our wish to also enjoy our property. And I can see that perhaps rights do impinge upon one another, and if we all have rights, then really none of us have rights. So now that I think about it, perhaps there are some things on this Act that need repealing. I'm looking here at the right to free elections. Well, yes, you see, I don't think we can charge people to go to the ballot box. That wouldn't be right. But I do think perhaps there are other ways of preventing those people who wouldn't have been able to afford that fee at the ballot box from going there in the first place. So, I definitely think people in prison shouldn't be allowed to vote. I can't imagine why we're still allowing them to vote. And I think that's something that should definitely be prevented. Yes, you see, I do wonder as well, perhaps, if people on benefits should also be prevented from voting, really, because they probably wouldn't understand who they're voting for anyway. And I do think one of the problems with democracy, marvellous as it is, and probably the most civilised thing in a frankly uncivilised world, is it only works when you vote for the right people. And I do think that Scotland is a prime example of voting for the wrong people. So yes, perhaps now that I think about it, although elections should be free, we should consider who should be allowed to vote and perhaps even people who don't own their own property should be prevented from voting, because they're not really contributing to society or showing good financial management if they are simply renting. So yes, I'm going to consider this act a little further. I think I shall read it more this week, and I shall probably come back and say some more things about it next week. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.